What's up guys, YST here and welcome back to the channel. And today I am joined by my good friend in Red. How's it going?
It's going great, YST. Thanks for having me, man. We did a collab on my channel last week, and now I'm here to return the favor. And I'm really excited to have our first collab on your channel.
Yeah, for sure. And do you just want to let my viewers here know as well a little bit about yourself and what you get up to on your channel, for anyone that's not aware?
Sure, absolutely. So I am a free-to-play player, and I do free-to-play content for all players, but also I focus on the kind of beginning and mid-game periods of the game because I feel like Ray doesn't always do the best job of like onboarding people. So I'm kind of trying to help onboard people, get them to enjoy the game and figure out all of the, various complicated mechanics that are in the game. And right now I've got a event going on my channel, which is called Raid Madness. You were part of that collaboration. We're going to be doing another one of those. And we have a 64 champion tournament going on right now. They're all epics, and we're trying to determine the number one epic in Raid Shadow Legends. And the votes are actually live. So you can go to my channel and find the link for that, and you can go and vote on your favorite epic.
Yeah, 100%. That was actually a really cool one. And till this day, I'm still thinking about, should I have changed my opinions? It's just in the back of my mind, like, do I choose this one over this one? So it's definitely really cool to get involved with. But basically, the topic of today's video, guys, is it's going to be around top tips to avoid and mistakes not to make as well. But the main thing is, who should you 60 first and who should you 60 next? Because I'm pretty sure you're aware. This is probably the biggest question asked in the community, right? Like, who do I want to 6-star? Where should I be focusing in the game? So hopefully, myself and Red can answer all of those questions in today's video. So do you just want to start off here of what would be your top tips for your first 60 champion? Because we get our first one in Kayle, Elhain, Gallic, and Aethel, right? Are you somebody that goes for building up your first 60 as that starter champion? Or do you go towards the direction of if there's a good promo code epic or, a free legendary as they do with Sun Wukong and Rathalos and maybe taking those to the first 60? How would you go about that as a player?
Well, I've run a lot of free-to-play accounts up over the years, and I do think it depends at what time of the game you enter the game. Who is the free login legendary, I guess, because Wukong is an excellent campaign farmer, but Rathalos I found is not as good.
Yeah.
So if you decided to forego, your starter champion and run up Wukong previously, that was probably okay. But I think new players need to have a campaign farmer that can clear 12-3 brutal in a reasonable amount of time with a high degree of success. Mm-hmm. And all of the starter champions can do that. So if you're not sure, I say the safe bet is to level up your starter champion. But if you're an experienced player and you can get away with a different champion, like we'll talk about your champion choice in just a minute, then I do think you can skip the starter champion, but usually I would say 90% of the time I've run my starter champion as my first 6-star.
Yeah, and do you have a preference of who do you feel is the best starter champion? I know it's all subjective. I'd say for myself, I love Aethel because of that A1 weaken and can coincide with the decreased defense options out there for clan boss. But is there anyone that you would go for? Probably Kayle, right? If I'm not mistaken.
No, I'm like you. I actually prefer Aethel.
Okay.
I do think all of the champions are viable, and I think Kayle is the most popular pick for a reason. Those poisons are really useful in clan boss and some other boss fights. And in the long run, he may be actually perhaps the starter champion that survives the longest in your rotation or in your roster. You may play him for the longest time. I like Aethel for a bunch of reasons. The reasons you mentioned. The A1 weaken and the triple hitter is great for like Fire Knight. The weaken's great for all the boss fights. The other reason I really like her is because she's Sacred Order, and my favorite promo code is Deacon. And that powerhouse duo just crushes faction crypts early on and gives you access to, the legendary forge materials almost immediately. And that just allows you to get better perception gear early in the game.
Yeah, for sure. Like, for someone like myself, I actually decided on this free-to-play series not to max out my starter champion. I was close to it. I was like, Gallic, do we bring him on board? But I chose that I would go the longer route with Miscreated Monster, which isn't the best, as you see. It sits between somewhere 25 to 35 seconds as an average, right? But the thing is, he can do it. And I've just kind of, I'm limited on energy anyway. So I thought, let me just invest into him as my first 60 because I know he's going to be a massive tank, a great damage dealer, holds versatile value. And my Gallic just wasn't going to be cutting it for me. Whereas if I did go for someone like Kayle, I didn't have a poisoner for a very long time, so I didn't have my clan boss damage that some others may have had. But I was lucky enough to pull a frozen banshee because I always gamble like that. I don't choose KO, and I'm just like, if frozen banshee comes, it's a straight substitute anyway. So
Let me ask you though, because I'm really
mhm.
curious. When did you actually sacrifice Gaelic? Did you use him as a 5-star chicken to help Miscreated get to 6 stars, or did you hold on to him for a while?
I didn't do it for Miscreated. I kept it for a while because he was just the face of the series, right? In my head, I was thinking, do you know what? This is a limited time one, and I need 5-star chickens. So for me to take that 60, do you know what it was? I'll tell you what it was. When we was doing the Eternal Dragon, and I had 1 day left to
Mhm.
go, I needed a 6-star Doom Priest, and it was like I had 24 hours to get this champ to 6-star, and it was rather sacrifice Gallic or sacrifice a Hefrak, right? And I just thought there is no way, even though we can't use this right now, that I could sacrifice a Hefrak over a Gallic. There's just no way. So that was when
Right.
the decision actually occurred. Yeah.
And it worked for you because
Yeah.
that 6-star Doom Priest got you all the way through Eternal Dragon.
Yeah, 100%. And do you know what? This actually leads us into the next one. And I think it's going to be who should you 6-star next? Because, like we just mentioned, it's all about decision making and what's best for your account and where you see that direction going. So, for you, as like a kind of more generic answer for first, what is the thing
Mhm.
that pushes you to your next 6-star champion when you're first going through the game?
It's actually very simple. And I think that when I do takeovers, this is the mistake I see with a lot of players who are maybe not familiar with the genre or haven't played a raid account before, which is that people get distracted by like high rated champions.
Hmm.
Do you know what I mean? You pull a new champion and you're like, oh, this guy is rated as a 5-star, but you don't think about the fact that that 5-star rating is in the same area as a champion you already own who's a 4.5 star. So it's like you don't need the upgrade on an account basis. It would be nice, but it's a luxury.
Yeah.
So generally what I do is I look for areas where I don't have coverage. I look for skill sets of champions that I could use in content where I literally have nobody. So let's say I don't have a block debuffs buff. Like here you're looking at Maneater, right? He gives you a block debuffs buff. And if I don't have one, then maybe I start considering him as, more important um, for being the next 6-star.
Yeah.
So if I'm just going with a generic answer, I'm always looking for new skill sets until I've fleshed out my entire roster. And then I start looking for value over replacement champions.
Yeah, that's exactly the way that I look at it. So in this series, you may have seen that there is many other players that's done a lot more champion upgrades, right? They've taken multiple champions to 6 stars, and it is going to have a lot of value for not just areas in the game, but also faction wars. But for someone like myself, I actually seen you say something on your stream, which is similar to my mindset. Is I like to not lose focus. Like I might only have 6-star or six-star champions, but I have been preparing the food for my next one, which I could do immediately, but it's just about where do you really want to take the direction of your account. Like for myself
Right.
personally, I'm a strong advocate for Demon Lord Clan Boss because it doesn't take resources, it's just keys, and it's the best chance to get your skill tomes and your shards in this game as well as gear. And then also the Doom Tower for a very similar reason because it's only costing keys, right? And you just have to go through floors, no energy requirements, and getting these free rewards, such as shards and chickens. So that's the direction that you may have seen I've taken my account because we've taken down rotation 2 in 30 days. And then we're now on par to doing rotation 3 of the Doom Tower within 60 days. So that's kind of where I've brought out the versatility because Rathalos is my damage dealer. Doom Priest is working as my cleanser, but also great for Clan Boss. And Books was another consideration, but we'll speak about that later. And then we've got my Ally Protector, my crowd control champion. So you can see that none of them are alike in the ways that they're used. We've then got my only max HP champion with decreased speed because this is the fundamental debuff you want, as well as turn meter reduction. And then we've got decreased attack and decreased defense AoE, and also my poisoner. So when I'm building up these champions, it's all about trying to add a layer to my account that I didn't have previously. And for my next one, I know that we went back and forth. I was thinking Eater because turn meter depletion, and I've actually put a lot of books into him since our last conversation. I got one of the cooldowns. And then also probably Godseeker Neri will be next because it will be a buff extender. And it's just about adding these layers of versatility to your account to tackle many areas in the game. Because these 6 champions, I've taken down everything. Doom Tower, Clan Boss, Arena, my Faction Wars, you name it. They've been in all my teams and done very well.
Yeah, and we've had a lot of discussions about your roster and debating, and you can see that there are some personal preferences as well, and
Yeah.
that's fine. Like there's no one way, there's no one blueprint for every player. And I do think part of it will always be the champions that you happen to have come your way. There's always an aspect of luck or chance
Hmm.
involved. So, for instance, you chose Miscreated Monster as your promo code champion. I chose Mordecai to pair with the Rathalos. And that means inherently, even if we pulled the same champions, we would need to 6-star different ones because we have different areas covered. So there's a lot that goes into it. But I think the biggest thing, if you're talking to a new player or, a relatively, say, mid-game or earlier player, I would just say what you said, which is like spread the skills out, look for new things, try to invest in champions that have long-term potential so that if you don't pull a replacement, you're still happy with the champion that you have. But ultimately, don't be in a rush. Don't feel like the solution for content is to have a lot of 6-stars.
Yeah.
It's better to focus on good 6-stars and get them optimized because, like you said, and you're in a similar situation where I am, you have 660s and you're doing almost everything that you need to do in the game right now.
Hmm.
And I'm the same. I only have 5 and I'm doing everything I need to do in the game right now. So you don't need a huge roster to be successful.
Yeah, 100%. And one mistake that I want to talk about going off the back of that is players can get very overwhelmed with pulling top tier champions because good luck is definitely a thing that can happen to players out there. It might not be all the time, but even right now, I got my Godseeker, my Sepulchre, and your mind could just be going absolutely everywhere. I want to rank all of these dudes up. But you got to remember that having, like, you see how I got Godseeker at 50, Man-Eater at 50, and I was thinking Sepulchre at 50. You could put yourself in a situation where that could have been your food champions to make one of your good champions your next 60. And you might be thinking, like, you don't want to be sitting with 10, 50 champions, and none of them are, like, built properly, right? They're just
Right.
factionables options at that point. So I guess, like, know exactly where the focus of your account is going and kind of go accordingly. Like, right now, I'm ready for my next 6-star, and now I'm starting to consider who do I go to next and weighing up the options.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, your focus for this account, and usually I think is Clan Boss, right? Clan Boss early.
Yeah.
Where I really like to focus some energy into Arena. And Arena is maybe a little bit easier than Clan Boss because it's more flexible. You can, there are 100 champions you could put into Arena and be successful with.
Hmm.
But I really like getting my Great Hall going and even my live arena going because then I can start to put those area bonuses in and put the affinity bonuses in the Great Hall, and that will actually help whatever roster you end up with. It does, like extra accuracy is extra accuracy for every champion in the affinity. So, or every champion in the area bonus that you're going for. So I do think Clan Boss is important. I tend to not emphasize Clan Boss as much as I think you do.
Yeah.
And but I agree with you on Doom Tower. I'm also focused on Doom Tower. I also like faction crypts because I think all of those areas give you a lot of resources for relatively cheap investments, I guess I would say, because you're not burning energy in any of those places.
So one thing that I wanted to speak about with you is I feel like the gem mine. I think it's a very big topic, and I think lots has changed since the release of this game, right? As a player, for you, personal preference, would you kind of recommend putting your gems into your masteries? Would you use it for energy for elsewhere? Or would you even go for something like the sparring pit over the gem mine? Or would this be your main focus if this wasn't a challenger series? I know that we're limited on time
Right.
and that we can't get an investment back before the series ends. But for an average player, which way would you be going first before going to the gem mine?
That's a really good question. And I think it has changed over time. And my
Mhm.
perspective on it has changed as I've run more accounts. It used to be that I said, I buy my first Champions Masteries, and then I go right to the gem mine, 1,500 gems, get it fully out. And that is a very efficient return on investment, and it works great.
Mhm.
But you can also snowball an account much harder if you buy maybe your second or even third Champions Masteries. And so if you think, 2 additional Champions Masteries are 1,600 gems, the gem mine is 1,500 gems. So would you rather have 2 more champions with masteries or the gem mine right away in terms of progressing your account? And I think honestly, I'm starting to lean towards the buying masteries more than I used to.
Mhm.
I certainly wouldn't go beyond 3 champions, and then I would absolutely invest in the gem mine. I do think the sparring pit is good value, and you should open that relatively early in your account. But I think in order to get the maximum value out of that, you have to be very efficient with your login times and like tracking when the timers are coming up. because if you're less than like 70% efficient, it's not as good as the gem mine.
Hmm.
So I do think gem mine first, then sparring pit after, and you can decide, how many champions masteries are you going to buy. But I would say somewhere between 1 and 3 makes sense.
Yeah, I'm in that same boat. Like for me, I done 2 with gems, and then from that, I was actually able to do stage 15 with just Rathalos and one other champion. And then once you do that, you could start, just farming them, because
Right.
you're not just getting your mastery scrolls, you're also getting XP for those champions that you're ranking up, and then you're also getting silver as well. And I'll leave a link in the description below of a full in-depth article that I wrote out for the website, and it breaks down all of the maths for how many champions to put in and all of that good stuff. But it's definitely very efficient, not only in terms of gems, but in terms of champion development. So, okay.
Yeah.
So this next part here that I wanted to speak about was books. I know it's a very big topic in Teleria, of course, because books are so scarce in this game, and we can't always reach Nightmare or Ultra Nightmare clan boss very early, because it all comes down to luck and RNG of who you can pull. Like if you get a Venomage and a Geomancer, you'll be flying, but if you don't have those, it could take you a very long time, especially with just epics, as we're using in this series. How do you go about books and who to prioritize on your accounts?
Oh, that's a good question. That's actually a really complicated question, I
Yeah.
think, to a certain extent, because it depends on the account. It depends what your objectives are. It depends on the champions that you happen to pull. So I would say in general, like we were talking about earlier, I believe in building your champions, your 6-star champions, as well as possible and really optimizing them. So it becomes part of the decision of who I 6-star next based on how many books I have. If I have no epic tomes, I might prioritize a champion who doesn't need epic tomes, like Doom Priest,
Hmm.
over a champion who might need epic tomes in order to be useful. I don't know, maybe like if I'm talking about like Ugo or somebody who I really want to be performing at a high level,
Yeah.
I want to drop books into her. So it does depend on how many books I have available, but it also may depend upon where I am in my account and what other options I have. So, for instance, I've been using Melga on
Hmm.
my challenge account, and she's sort of a mid-tier support champion, but she's been incredibly valuable in my challenge account. And I'm running her completely without books.
Hmm.
And one of the reasons I'm running her without books is because, like, if you look at her cooldowns, like, you would want books in her A3 and her A2, but then look at her A1,
Oh man, she
right?
likes to read.
Right. And I don't want to waste 8 books on her A1 just to get to potentially the A2 and the A3.
Yeah.
So I haven't booked her at all. And I've actually found that she does a fairly good job, because usually if I need a revive, I need it one time.
Hmm.
And so I don't really need the cooldowns, and like one shield can be enough. But as I progress, if I got past the 90 days mark, I would probably either book her or I would move to a better support champion, like a
Yeah.
Scylla the Drakes or somebody like that, or a Rector Drath or whoever I could get. So I do think there are a lot of considerations when it comes to books. But one thing that I really like to remind people is, if you have an arena champion, for instance, who only needs to go one time, they don't need books.
Hmm.
Right? Like, unless they're the damage dealer,
Unless
you
they're the
you
damage
don't
dealer.
need books, right? So maybe if you wanted the drop defense champion, but like if you have like a high Katoon, let's say you have a high Katoon as your speed lead, you don't care about the cooldown on the increase turn meter, because you are really only using it once in order to activate your team and then hopefully nuking out the enemy team. So sometimes if you're short on books, it's good to build a champion like that, where you're going to get a lot of value out of them in one place, where the cooldowns don't matter or the percentages don't matter, or whatever it happens to be.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. A good example would be Madame Ceres. So she can enable that decrease
Perfect.
attack and decrease defense without any buff values, right? It's all based on cooldowns. Now, if you are taking this elsewhere as your primary option for debuffing, then of course you may want to consider it. But when you think about stuff like the arena as a one-trick pony and you're doing a turn meter boost into Madame Ceres, do you really need this cooldown? Absolutely not. And if you need to cycle this on a 4-turn cooldown, your team might already be dead, right? Being brutally honest.
Right.
So
Right.
even like champions such as Rian the Conjurer, very similar effect, but she needs a buff chances on this one. So this is where I may consider it, because that is now enabling a removing of all debuffs, right? And that's actually one of the reasons why I actually chose a Doom Priest, because I knew in the back of my mind I could rank up this champion, have no book investment, and it's all about the passive ability. A very good example would be Vogoth as well. who, if you pull him,
Mhm.
does not need books to enable his passive outside a bit of buff values with the leech debuff, but still very consistent without it. So it just really comes down to does the champion enable books and where you exactly using them. Like for me, let's just say my Stag Knight, great example. My core focus of him is I needed decreased attack and decreased defense on a 3-turn cooldown. So I made sure all of my books went into this. And look at this, we've actually not used the rest of this. The reason for that I've actually left it, because decreased speed is very powerful, is I've got another champion that can enable this who is fully booked. So you've got to start thinking like, if we're using 2 of these champions in the same place, why do you need to waste books on somebody does the exact same thing on arguably a better chance here, right? With like a each hit placement 4-time hitter. So yeah, it's all about weighing up those options and then saving those books to put it into someone else. Like what I saved from this Stag Knight now, I'm not going to invest into my Man Eater until he gets this cooldown. And I might even go all the way to this one as well for a full depletion here.
Right. And this is where, experience shows. Like, I just looking at your account, you're showing me the champions. I'm like, that makes a lot of sense in terms of where you put your books. And it synergizes with the same ideas that we were talking about when you, in terms of 6-starring your next champion, right? It's like, get the value that you can, but spread out the resources to get the most value that is possible. So for instance, if a cooldown on a particular skill doesn't help you, don't waste that book. That book can go into somebody else, get you more value in that other champion. Same thing with 6-stars. Like, maybe I can run this champion at 5 stars. I don't need him at 6 stars, or maybe I have a better option and I want to be looking forward in terms of who I 6-star next. So it is about getting the most out of your resources. And especially as a free-to-play player, they're always limited. Books are always a bottleneck. You will actually have more 6-star champions eventually than you could ever book because you just don't get books as fast.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like even right now, we was talking about it before. Like I really wanted to build up a Godseeker in Eerie, and I took it to 5 stars because the main reason was I had a little strategy in my mind of how can I take down Bommel. But I actually managed to beat it with a rank 50 Godseeker because I managed to keep her alive with 2 rank 50 champions, by the way, and managed to get it done without it. So now I know I can max up my Man Eater and not feel bad about it because I still need books on her anyway. And if I can't enable the cooldowns, what's the point in ranking this up? I could probably invest it into something that I really, really need.
Sorry, YSD. That actually reminds me of a really good tip, and maybe you can also back me up on this. I think that when you're talking about 6-stars and you're talking about 50s versus 60s,
yep,
I generally think that tanks and supports are really good at 50, but damage dealers need to be 60 if you're going to use them. Mm-hmm. The only exception being a support who's like in clan boss and needs this tier 6 mastery.
Yeah.
But so early on, like Godseeker and Eerie, you don't really need her at 6-stars because she can be very tanky even at level 50. What do you think about that? Do you think that tanks and supports are better at 50 if you're going to keep somebody at 50, or do you also run damage dealers at 50?
I guess it comes down to what they're enabling, because let's just say someone like a Torogi the Frog or a miscreated monster, if they're bringing in a form of ally protection, they're not going to have the HP requirements you need for the onslaught because they're now eating up the damage for everybody else. But in a more generic sense, I can see that for sure because I can use this Godseeker in Faction Wars, and if I had a full team, she would probably survive all the way up until stage 21 if I built it correctly. Like right now, rank 50, we have got nearly 200 speed, nearly 3,000 defense, and 20,000 HP. Like, it's not crazy, but in terms of survivability, she is going to be able to survive a lot better than maybe a Frozen Banshee, right? At rank 50, she's just going to get whacked like a wet noodle. So, yeah, no, right. I agree to, like, even Sepulchre Sentinel, defense-based champion, like, overall, if I built her correctly, she'd have a lot of survivability in these areas for sure. But obviously, masteries is it's like one of the main things, right? Getting that War Master, getting that wherever you need at the bottom to enable that for sure. Yeah, so one thing I actually wanted to speak about, because I have seen a lot of people do it in this series, and I just wanted to bring it up, is, guys, please do not feed your epic champions to boost into your next 6-star, because I know it could be like, oh, get your next 60, get your next 60, and it is true, but not at the sacrifice of epic champions, because even though some of them might be trash, well, they don't really buff epics anymore and stuff, to be fair, but Faction Wars, you really want to be enabling this. You want your duplicates for your Guardian Ring, right? You want to be ranking this up and getting stats for all of those champions that you might want to use in other areas. So I'd say, like I've done here, put them in the vault, right? If you've got like 6, 7, 8 in your super endgame, different story. But especially as you're going through the game, you might find that one of them could do something very valuable for your account. For example, my Grunch Killjoy is my only cleanser. So let's just say I was in a Nether Spider and I was really struggling. This is a full-out cleanse for my team. And, that might have been someone I could have sacrificed before. So they've all got sneaky ways to be using your account even later on in the game. So don't just think short term, think long term, and hold on to as much as you can, for sure, is what I would say.
I agree. And I think that the thing about epics in this challenge is if you know you're not going to use them, maybe you want that extra 6-star because there's only 90 days and you're trying to get as much progress as possible. But for most accounts, that's not a healthy way to approach the game. You want to hold on to your epics. At the very least, you can level them up to 40 and use them in faction crypts for a while. But I think the other thing for any newer players is that you don't know what you don't know yet. Like, don't sacrifice an epic and then 6 months from now go, oh, that's the perfect epic that I could use right now, and I regret having, fed him. So I would think, at least keep one copy of most of the epics that you get. If you're not sure, ask your clan mates, reach out in a Discord community, do some research with the content creator videos. But err on the side of caution. You're probably going to get value out of them anyway, so don't rush turning them into chickens, basically. Like you said, YST, I think it's really valuable to hold on to these champions.
Yeah, 100%. Because I see it all the time in my comment section, like, I wish I could have done this, but I fed my X, Y, and Z like a few months ago, and I wish I didn't do it. And I hate seeing those things. Like, I've seen some people that they sacrificed their Vogoth early on, and then now they can't beat Bommel, and all they wanted to do was get their next 6-star champion, and that just sped up the process for them a little bit. And it's, it could be pretty tough because champion training events are always happening, fusions are always happening, and you could feel a little bit like, I need these points so I can get this legendary, but you could be sacrificing your account in the long run by, getting rid of these epic champions. So, okay, so in terms of your next 6-star as well, is there anything else that you wanted to maybe touch up on? Any more decision making?
I do think that, for newer players or players who are starting new accounts, maybe this is your first alt and you're an experienced player. And let's say you were a spender on one account. Now you're going free to play just to try it out. Like, there can be different scenarios. But I think the biggest, most important thing I would suggest is patience. Like, you want to be patient. This game entices you to feel like you need to rush, that there's FOMO. You're always going to be missing out on something if you're not pushing really, really hard.
Yeah.
But as we're seeing, you can be very successful with a small roster if you build that roster correctly. And if you are patient, you will get more efficient use out of your resources. And that means over time, even though you're not seeing the immediate progress that you would like to see, over time, you're going to snowball harder and your account's going to be in a healthier place for it. So I just think whether you're, choosing your next 6-star or how to book a champion or whether you're going to turn a champion into a chicken, all of those things, just be patient. The game, it's a long game. This is a short challenge. It's 90 days, but that's really an artificial construct. The game is a long-term game. So unless you're running a challenge account, be patient.
Yeah, for sure. Like, just to put it into context, guys, with these 6 champions, I have pretty much almost got to Arbiter. Like, it's just all about doing spirit keeps. And of course, we're under a time constraint to do it in 90 days. But for an average player, if you had the right champions and the right core mechanics and bringing in all these fundamentals and not just building, like, the worst thing that you could do is like build 5 top tier damage dealers and having no support, no revivers, no turn meter boosters, no decreased defense. This is where the development process starts to be very hard. I think one top tip as well, something that I've actually made a big mistake on this account, is there is a bunch of missions up here, right? That says, where is it? Let me just find it. So it's like rank up a champion to from Force, Void, like you see one here, Void 6 of Ascension, and they're not retroactive. So now if I really want to get Arbiter within my 90 days, I'm not going to be able to do it unless I literally choose these champions to put my 6th Ascension on. So I'd say, like, one thing looking forward is plan accordingly. Like, this mission's coming up. If you really want your Arbiters, maybe just don't put that 6-star Ascension on until you reach these missions. Otherwise, you are going to have to cycle a whole range of champions again, all the way up to 6 stars just to get those Ascensions on. So just something to be wary of, something that I definitely messed up. Staying on top of your arena as well, because one thing that I've noticed was I was stuck in Gold 2 for the longest time ever. It did cost me a lot of gems. It was a big investment, but once we actually finally got to Gold 5, you'll see that there's a lot of one-man defenses in comparison to Gold 2 and Gold 3 because those players are still trying to rise up. People up here just, they don't really care. They're just helping people out, I think. I don't know.
I put in a one-man defense on all of my Gold 5 teams. And really, you have a limited number of losses that you can take. So as long as you have a real defense for just like a day or two at the end of the week, you're going to stay in Gold 5 if you have a team for it. If you're really early into getting into Gold 5, then you may want to just keep your regular defense up because you're not really on par yet. You're not quite strong enough. But once you have, your arbiter, let's say, then you don't mind so much putting in a one-man defense and just making it faster for everybody, because that's the
Yeah.
big thing about Arena is it takes so much time. And so just make it, faster for everybody. Put in a one-man defense.
Yeah. And also, one other thing I want to speak about is if you're trying to rush to your next 6-star, one thing that I've strategically started to do is making use of clan versus clan. Like right now, we're in tier 1, completely fine. But the amount of chickens that you get here, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, plus a 4-star, this could be the thing that tips you over. And this really did push me to have my champions. And while you're here on stream or on the video, I am going to rank up my next 60 just for you.
Okay.
We have to bring them out the vault though. So these are my champions, and I was actually ranking up Templar for Bommel, but we took that down without it. Let's go. All right, so now
So you're going Maneater. All right.
yeah, we are going Maneater, and the reason for it is one, I have now got a book investment, so if I decided I wanted books in him, I might as well rank him up and get the full value out of him. For 2, I do want those banners so we can get that accuracy so I can beat the Dark Fae. So this is where looking forward really comes to fruition, guys. Like, I beat Bommel, I've beat all of these things, and I want to get to that final milestone, but he does not have the accuracy stats to reduce that turn meter, and getting that accuracy banner is going to be the way to do that. So, here we go. Another 6-star on the accounts. And
All right.
the issue is now is, like, do we ascend it, or do we keep it for the Arbiter mission? It's an issue, man. We have to wait.
Well, if you need the banner, you have to ascend it. You don't have a choice. If you need the accuracy, you have to get the banner.
Yeah.
Which is a little bit tricky. But I do think that, this is another thing that maybe we should mention, which is I think certain champions like Maneater can be really famous for one thing. Oh, he's such a great clan boss champion for an unkillable team. Absolutely. But he has value in a lot of places. So, that's another reason to be patient. Like, really think about your champions, learn about them, talk to experienced players, do your research on YouTube, because this is a great solution for Dark Fae, and you're going to crush Dark Fae with Maneater. He's really going to make that team much easier than it would be without him.
Mm-hmm.
And, eventually you'll still get value out of him in Clan Boss. So it's a great next 6-star.
Yeah, and he's pushing me to my Spider 20 as well. Once I get that cooldown, I can enable a full unkillable team because I've got a miscreate monster for the stunts, and in the right tune, I'll be able to cycle that unkillable on just before everyone's about to die. And there's a little thing that I've seen, and I'm like, oh, if I just had that one cooldown, Spider 20 will be in the dirt because of this value, and fully depleting that turn meter on stage 20 as well is going to be very powerful. Like, just to put it into context, I actually didn't show it in my previous episode. Iron Twins, we're up to stage 6. We're stage 20 on every single potion keep. With those 6 champions, by the way, guys. Nothing crazy, no legendaries outside of Rathalos. Minotaur, we're now farming it in under a minute. Ice Golem, we've got up to stage 21. Spiders, we're now on stage 20, and it will be soon. I'm very close to doing it. Just need the Maneater. Dragon, we're now slowly getting towards the hard variation, which I know that you're in now. Fire Knight, almost on 20. Like, Phantom Shoguns, like, we pushed all the way to nearly stage 10. And this is all done with just 6 champions, and it's so cool to see, man, how far you can take it with such limitations.
Yeah, and one of the most fun things about, I think, the team Shadowverse and talking to each other all the time is we're constantly comparing and like saying, oh, I got this new, milestone. I hit this new milestone. And you and I, in terms of dungeon progress, are like mirrors. We're almost exactly in the same place in every dungeon. I might be a little bit higher in Dragon. You're one, stage higher in Fire Knight. It's very, very similar. And our rosters look nothing alike. We don't have, like, other than Rathalos, we don't use any of the same champions. So that's the other thing. It's like, we have the same approach to roster building, and we're accomplishing all of the goals in the game, but with completely different methods.
Yeah.
And I think that's cool to know that specifically, especially in a challenge with only epics, you can still do all of this stuff in a relatively short timeline with primarily epic champions.
Yeah, and it's actually, I enjoyed this free-to-play series so much more than last year's, and I had Pythions and all of that good stuff. This one, I have never had. It took me back to the first time where I beat the Doom Tower, and it reminded me why I actually really loved this game was the creative strategies. And I honestly sat there and thought it would be impossible for me to beat Eternal Dragon or the Griffin at a certain point or Bommel. And it just shows that with these same champions and the right builds and the right speed tuning, anything is possible. Like, obviously, once you go into like the hard variation and you start going later games, a bit different. But, to get all of those initial things done for the first time, I found it very enjoyable, man.
Yeah, it's super fun. And, again, you think about the fact that we have both now cleared Bommel 90 in this rotation without a Vogoth,
Yep.
without a Lady Annabelle, without a Burn Geary,
Or
without
cheesing
any
it.
of the like, without cheesing it, like just straight up using the same 6 or 7 champions that we've had in all of our other content.
Mhm.
So it's possible. It's possible to beat a champion like, or I'm sorry, a boss like Baumel if you're just smart about like how do how much resistance do you put on, how much accuracy do you need, how fast do you need to go, what champions are like problematic that you need to keep out, what masteries do you use, and then you find solutions. And that is very exciting, and it's really cool because each of us have had ideas for the other teammates, like all of us have talked about it,
Yeah.
and every time we talk about it we all like, oh yeah, that makes sense, I like that, let's keep
Yeah.
going, let's do that again, let's try that, and so everybody's gotten solutions from everybody else in the team, which is just super fun. Like it's a single player game, and we've turned it into a multiplayer game, and that's awesome.
Yeah, 1000%. So, is there anything else here that you wanted to speak about today in terms of next 6-star or maybe another top tip or something, like any big mistakes that you might have made that you could maybe put to people out there?
Oh, that's interesting. In terms of mistakes, I would say the big mistake that we talked about is, potentially feeding epics that could be valuable
Mhm.
down the line. But I will say this, because in this challenge, we're not using legendary champions.
Yeah.
And so I would say, there is a mistake that can happen with newer players, which is to overvalue legendary champions simply because they're legendary. Remember that like getting legendary tomes is really tricky.
Yeah.
Some legendary champions are very powerful without books, so you can definitely get value out of them. But I would say for most rosters, in the first 6 months of an account, you're probably going to 6-star 3 or 4 times as many epics as legendaries, and that's a healthy ratio. Unless you are a spender. If you're a spender, then it can change. But if you're not a spender, focus on your epics and don't overvalue the legendaries. I'm not saying don't 6-star them,
Mhm.
but I'm saying make sure that you think about, when you're going to 6-star them.
Yeah, it's all about that decision making, the right time. You'll feel it.
Yeah.
I can't explain it. There's a time in your account where you're just like, I just need that next level of damage or that next level of support. Whether that be, I know that how Hades is getting a lot of value from Queen and Cora. You're getting value from
Mhm.
your Archer, right? And these champions are
Yeah.
just phenomenal, big game changing ones. And honestly, when I'm first going through the game, I always say I would rather have a top tier legendary support than a top tier legendary damage dealer because that support champion can really carry you through some of these areas.
Yeah, a lot of times, like in this particular case, Rathalos is our everywhere carry. We use him as our primary damage dealer, but also on my account, I have Near Gigante Archer,
Yeah.
and she is like my all-around carry support. And those two champions by themselves can be surrounded by a whole cast of rares and epics that support those two champions. So you will have a carry. You'll have somebody that you make the focal point of your roster. And sometimes that'll be a legendary, or sometimes it might be two, but it is a good way to think like, if this is my most powerful champion, I
Mhm.
should build a roster to support that champion.
In terms of the reserve vault, I have got 2 legendaries here. I also had Great Hoof Loriaka. But let's just say I maxed up. Let's just say I pulled War Chief, my first legendary. Exciting times, right? It can be very quick to throw your legendary books in, and and then your next legendary might be someone super top tier. Like for me personally, I always like to sit back a little bit when I pull something. I just wait a little bit more. Maybe a new
Right.
fusion might come out, or you might pull another champion. And I always say if I don't have enough books to book the cooldowns I want, I always save my legendary books. For example, let's just say I've got a Hefrak now, right? And I really wanted to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 books on this champion. If I don't have 5 legendary books, my rule of thumb is I wait. When I got those 5
Right.
legendary books, if I still don't have anything that I want to max up more, then I invest it. And that's the way that I've always gone around it for the past 5 years. On that note, I guess like we did cover most of the bases we wanted to. Who to 6-star next, biggest mistakes to avoid, and all of that good stuff. Anything you want to say here before we sign off?
Just thanks for having me. It's been super fun getting to know you during this challenge. And I'm really happy to be on the channel. And also, don't forget to check out Raid Madness and go vote. And YST, you have to vote too. Have you voted yet on your favorite epics?
Yeah, man, we're all in there. We got
Okay,
some
great.
spicy picks in there. Guys, you can
Yeah.
find that in the description below as well as Corred's channel. Make sure you guys go and drop a subscribe, and we'll see you all in a video soon. Peace.